All right, this is a sort of a special edition of the Wild and Woolly Adventures of a Wasp. This is Steve.
Wild and exotic.
Wait, I keep saying Wild and Woolly. Maybe we should go with Wild and Woolly.
Well,
the
we'll
Wild
work on it, yeah.
and Exotic Adventures of a Wasp.
Right.
But I'm going to do a little interview here with Don about how he met his wife Pat and how the romance sort of blossomed and where it went from there. So let's start back in the day. I think it probably was junior high, high school. You and Mom lived in the same town, probably had some of the same friends. But when did you first become aware of Pat's presence there?
Well, I've talked previously on these podcasts about my experience in the high school band as a cymbal player. So I got recruited to do that, and while I was doing that, I noticed this beautiful, beautiful girl who was a drum majorette. And we'd be out, we had to practice like 2 or 3 nights a week. We'd be out there, and she was prancing around with this thing, and I thought, boy, that's pretty nice. I'd like to get to know her. Well, the years went by, and she was kind of dating this guy, and as a matter of fact, as it turned out, she dated him all through high school, and then they went to different colleges, but they stayed, close.
But did you know him?
Yeah, it turned out to be one of my best friends.
Okay, who was it?
Randy.
It was Randy. So
yeah.
Mom, people who listen to this will I think know some of this. So during high school, Mom was generally dating Randy.
Yeah, and through a lot of college.
But you knew Randy, so you must have known her.
Yeah.
Did you?
I knew her, but
double dates.
Never didn't know that close. But I just knew that she was Pat. She was dating Randy. Well, then Randy went in the service. He went in the Navy, and he was away for a while. And the romance with Pat kind of, died off. And Randy finally ended up getting married to a Navy nurse. He was a pharmacist. He got married to a Navy nurse.
But he went then into the Navy right after high school.
No, as a matter of fact, I'm not sure of that. Whether he completed Purdue and then went in the Navy, or whether he interrupted Purdue and went in the Navy. I'm not sure about
and
that.
Mom was after a couple years difference between you and Mom, so she was a little younger.
I was in the class of 50. Randy was in the class of 51. Mom in the class of 52.
Okay, so
yeah,
minor differences, but at that age, there's kind of major differences. People leave high school, they go to college, big life changes.
That's right.
So he had gone on to in the Navy.
Yeah, and when I graduated from college in '57, I had a job in Rochester at Stromberg Carlson, and I came here, as I recall, right out of graduation, like the Monday after graduation, I was here. And a couple of weekends later, I went back to Jamestown for a weekend, and dated a girl that I had known for a long time, a sister of a good friend of mine. And we got invited to we were going to a beach party in Lake Erie. Well, it turned out to be a terrible day. It was raining and lightning, so my friend Gary Anderson said, "We'll have it in my parents' living room." So we did that. We got all the beer, we got all the stuff, and we all went on the floor of his living room. And at that party, my friend Gary's date was Pat Lund. So at the party, we talked, and I said, "I've got a job in Rochester. I'm working out there." She said, "Well, I'm in Rochester. I'm staying with my aunt and uncle, Mame and Bud, and I've got a job teaching in Fairport." And I said, "Well, we got to get together then. We got to get to see each other." Well, so we kind of made plans. But I think we said in a couple weeks, she had been home because of death in the family. So she was not going to be back there for a while. So I had then bought, when I graduated, a 1957 Ford convertible. Huge Ford Fairlane. Oh, God, it was a gorgeous car. And so I went back to Rochester. I told her about where I was living. So she came back to Rochester and set out to try to find me. So she was driving up and down the college streets in Rochester, and finally, I lived on Dartmouth Street. She finally spotted a car that she thought was mine. So she went up to and started to put a note on the windshield. And a guy came out and said, "Hey, what are you doing out there? Stay away from my car." And she said, "Well, I'm trying to find a guy who has a car just like this." And he said, "Well, there's a guy that lives down about 4 houses on the other side of the street. He's got yellow and white Fairlane." So she said, "Okay." So we're there, I think it was on a Friday night, and the way the place I lived, which was called the Squires Club, we hired a housekeeper, and she cooked our meals, took care of our rooms, and so she had cooked us a great dinner on a Friday night, and we're eating, and somebody knocks on the door. My friend goes to the door, and he said, "Yes." Somebody said, "I'm the Avon lady. I'm here to sell you cosmetics." So I heard her voice, and I realized who it was. So I went out there, and we chuckled about that. Everybody laughed about the Avon lady. And then I said, "What are you doing tomorrow night?" And she said, "I'm available." So we went to see Around the World in 80 Days at the, what's the name of that theater on Monroe Avenue?
The Monroe.
Yeah.
Monroe Theater.
And that was in September, and we got engaged later on, and we got married the following June.
So you got engaged before Christmas, do you think? Do you recall?
I think we got at Christmas. But we were just ripe. You know, she was out of school. I was out of school. We came from similar backgrounds. We were very compatible. It just sort of happened without too much forethought.
Well, let me just go back a little bit here, and there may be no answer to this question, but you knew that she was dating Randy. Mm-hmm. You were, dating around or had some girlfriends back in high school. There was a big jump there from 51 to 57 when you graduated.
Yep.
Had you not forgotten about her, but you could sort of move on with your life, so it was a surprise when you saw her again at the thing? Or did you... I guess I'm curious whether back in high school, even... because Randy was a friend of yours, there was no traveling in the same circles? There wasn't any...
we knew each other, but we were not close.
Yeah.
And what happened was, back then your lives kind of everybody went in sort of different directions. A lot of guys went to college, or girls went to college, and then all the men had to go in the service someplace, so we were off in various places. And
but you weren't aware, for example, when you went to college or went to the service, that Pat was... at Brockport. Did you know that?
I might have. I honestly don't remember. She was, I guess I did, because she was rooming with the girlfriend of a good friend of mine, Meb Bergwald, and Barb Belknap, and Pat were roommates. So I stayed in touch with Meb, and as a result, I sort of knew that Pat was there.
You sort of knew, but was there any conscious keeping?
No, it just was kind of happenstance. We both ended up at this party. We're both living in Rochester. We end up at a party in Jamestown. We found out we're both kind of available. We get together, and the rest is history.
All right, so you got engaged around Christmas time, then married. Do you remember the engagement when you asked Mom to marry you? Or not?
It was a foregone conclusion. I think she might have asked me. Again, but there was no question. We got together. We loved each other. We were compatible, and it was only a question of when it was going to happen, not if it was going to happen. It just did, and it was perfect.
But some of those first couple months dates, did you have compatible friends here in town, or did you spend a lot of time together? Yeah. What were those first few months like? The first dates, the first
we did the normal things. We dated. We went to the movies. One of our favorite spots was called the Dickens Restaurant, and the Dickens, where we went to, originally moved and onto University Avenue, is now gone. But the thing that attracted us there was we'd go there on a Friday night, and we'd get what was called a number 8 shrimp cocktail. These shrimp were about the size of a small banana. 4 of them in a shrimp cocktail, 75 cents. I mean, it was incredible. But then we did all the normal stuff we did, and we went to Jamestown. I met her parents. Well, her mother, her father had died. She met my parents, met my family. I met her sister and family, and it was just no question, but just perfect.
And we'll sort of wrap up here on the wedding, but you decided to get married. An engagement occurred. I've never heard that maybe she asked you. Do you think that's possibly?
Nobody had to ask anybody. It was only a question of, well, we're going to do this. When are we going to do it? How's this going to work out? I never went down on my knee and proposed to her, and she never did that to me. But it was just.
Do you recall with the ring, or opening the box, or any of that?
Well, I do recall that Uncle Bud. Everybody knows a guy.
Mm-hmm.
Bud says, I know a guy who can get you a good deal on a ring. So he takes me into this store downtown Rochester. I can't remember the name of it, but he knew a guy. The guy said, "Hi, Bud, how you doing?" And the guy said, "Look, we're looking for an engagement ring." So he shows me 2 or 3. Bud says, "That looks good. How much?" Paid the money. Bing, we're out of there.
And so you decided to get married. Did you get married here in Rochester or in Jamestown? How did that work out?
Then we got married in Jamestown. Pat had gone to a church called the Mission Church. I was a Lutheran. My family was Lutheran. She had gone to the Mission Church, which is even a more strict Lutheran faith. So we went there and contacted the minister and Reverend Peterson, another good Swedish name in Jamestown.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yeah, we arranged a date. Now the difference was, these days you have a wedding and then you have this huge reception with a band and people dancing and open bar and all this stuff. We got married and the reception was in the church basement. And people brought, dish to pass.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we had any booze. We might have had some booze. But, so we had a very nice reception and then...
Family was there. Was there 50 people at the wedding, more or less? Friends? Family?
Maybe 50.
Yeah.
Maybe. And then we left. We had this worked out because people like to attach, tin cans to the back of your car.
Yeah.
My friend John Johnson had an uncle who lived a little bit out of town. So we went up there the morning of the wedding and left my car by 57 Ford Cuberto. We left my car in his garage. So then when we pulled away from the wedding reception, I should go back a minute and talk about the clothes that I wore.
Yeah.
I had Uncle Bud, knew a guy.
Knew another guy. He's pretty well connected, Bud.
Who had sold suits. So we went down
Well, let me say, at this point, you're already calling him Uncle Bud. It wasn't your uncle. It was Bud's uncle.
He was.
But
Uncle
he was kind of.
It was kind of a generic title. Everybody called him Uncle Bud.
Yeah.
So he says, "Come on." We went down to Oscar Raymond's down on Joseph Avenue, which is not in the best part of town. We go in there. I walked away with 2 suits, 2 summer suits for $25. Yeah.
And one of them you wore at the wedding?
Well, did I wear it at the wedding? No, I think I wore a dinner jacket at the wedding, or maybe a tux.
I think it was a white dinner jacket with a kind of a bow tie, right?
Yeah, and then after that we got changed. I put on this, one of the suits that I bought for, $13.50 or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the picture that we have of waving goodbye. The sleeves are a little bit too long.
Mm-hmm.
But then we got in John's car, we drove away, we drove up to his uncle's house, we transferred into my car, and went on our honeymoon.
And last, we'll finish up with the honeymoon. Where'd you go on the honeymoon?
To Cape Cod.
Cape Cod. How did you arrange that? Where did you go?
Well, funny story about going up there. Pat's uncle, another uncle, had given us a bottle of champagne. And we drove, carefree. We put the top down in the car. We put the champagne back in the boot. We head up went to Buffalo and stayed the first night. And then the next day we head up for Cape Cod. Nice, warm day, sunshine. We proceeded to both get so sunburned we could hardly touch each other. And in the middle of that, the champagne bottle that was in the back of the car got too hot and blew out. So we had champagne all over the back of the car. We had our second night in wedded bliss. We couldn't touch each other because we were too sunburned.
All right. Well, that's a good special edition of the wild and exotic adventures of WASP, and maybe we'll follow this up with a few other similar ones. But we'll be back for more in the future.
Great.